So, when did you start making films and why?
Gun at your head. I think that our background at art school was graphics and illustration. And I think at a certain point, as we liked cinema all along, we went to see all kinds of films. There was that feeling that the still image in a drawing, it needed was movement, and it needed sound and music. So I think that the only route to go was film, and knowing that it was pretty hard to get money for a live action world or to shoot live action, we realized that stop frame animation would be the perfect route, because it's just tabletop and you could just do it in your room. So the first films were shot literally on a kitchen table. So I think we all know that trick or that limitation.
Sure.
But so really it was about it was movement, having sense of space, dimensional space was what really pulled us eventually towards puppets.
I think that sounds pretty cool. I mean, the whole prospect of creating like your own little universe, you know.
Yeah.
And while photography is no doubt really cool, the whole idea that you can make it come to life, you know, with stop motion animation,
Absolutely.
you can have music, it's a beautiful synthesis.
Yeah. I mean, I think that even when we were at the art school in Philadelphia, we shot, I think pretty quickly we caught on to shooting like multiplane. We just suddenly said, oh, but you could get a little bit more depth by shooting on layers of glass.
I've noticed that in a lot of your films, there's a lot of reflections. You know, there's the use of a lot of mirrors and also
glass,
water.
Yeah, glass too. We spent shooting Street of Crocodiles because we had so much glass in the decors that every time we went to shoot, we had to duck.
Oh, really?
So we said we spent 2 months ducking, physically ducking.
Really? Wow. I wanted to ask, so do each one of you specialize in a different part of the process, or is it pretty unified?
I think the one distinction that we make is that whoever builds the puppet animates that puppet. So once we elaborate a range of puppets or what we're going to do, then I think it's just by one of us will go on for one set of puppets and the other will go in another direction. But on the decors we work together.
And normally we always say one starts from the left, one starts from the right, we meet in the middle. Because initially you're trying to discover the sense of decor. Decors probably more closely inform the puppets than the puppets inform the decor. In that case,
so sometimes that you might start with the decors, then you say, that'll establish the way that the puppets will look and perhaps how stylized they are. And other times, like in Crocodiles, we started with the main puppet and then everything sort of blossomed from that initial puppet.
It's interesting you say that because when I was in university, I had a playwriting teacher, and the first thing he told us was a lot of times people will try to write a play first and then come up with the characters. But the way you said it, it's interesting. He said the best thing you can do sometimes is to come up with a character. You know, just really develop that character, and then everything else sort of blossoms outwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we find that gives us much more liberty, and I think there's a greater fruition when I mean, personally, that's the way we feel we can work best. I think that I don't know, you might ask about script writing and things like that, but we have we're very, very much believe in the bluff, the intelligent bluff with a script, knowing that as we start to build things that it'll amplify, and then the script gets annotated or moved around.
That's funny how that works.
It's our way of working. We work best that way.
it's not contagious to others. It's only not dangerous.
That's awesome.
How does the British culture influence your work?
The British?
The British culture.
Culture.
Yeah.
No,
it,
not at
it
all.
doesn't influence us at all.
Not one thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we don't take a thing from British. We don't really take a lot from American culture either. I think we sort of feel that in terms of literature, we're open to, you know, could be Eastern Europe, but it could be Japanese, or it
German,
could be
yeah,
South
French,
American, German writers. So it just depends the way the project's going. I mean, we have done projects in America. So if we did a documentary on the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia, then you're deeply into an aspect of American culture, or how they collected things, or the early days of Thomas Mutter, who made the collection in the early 1840s.
I've noticed that a lot about your films. Well, I've noticed some like there was an homage to M.C. Escher, and then
Was there?
Was it?
I mean, we like Escher, but
it seemed very Escher-esque, so to
Yeah.
speak. It was I'm blanking on what it was called, but it was
Yeah.
it was the one where it was there were figures that were made out of those compasses that architects
Oh,
use.
Oh,
to-
right,
Yeah.
yes.
yeah, that was rehearsals for Extinct Anatomies.
That one.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we made a homage to. No, we made a homage to Fragonard, wasn't it?
The painter.
There's the famous painter who did the image of which we based the main. It's, you see a woman and a man going to close a lock on a door, but you don't know
If he's locking her
if
in.
Mm.
or locking the two of them in because something's going to intrude from the outside, which is the angle we went for. There was some metaphysical.
But then we made the second homage to the cousin of Fragonard, who was the anatomist,
Yeah,
and hence why all the flayed muscles in the film.
yeah.
Now I see.
So see, again, something that wasn't anticipated, but it suddenly blossomed from whilst we started making the sets, and
Yeah.
we
There you go.
discovered there was somebody else more important.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So, do you draw storyboards or write some technical script before shooting a sequence?
I think that the only time we do storyboards is when we've done commercials where they ask to know exactly what you're going to do, and then we're professionals, we can do that, but reluctantly. But when we do our private films, I don't think we ever, because between the two of us, we don't have to prove to the other one that we can draw or do a frame.
Yeah, and
or sometimes
also
we'll
it's-
sketch something out and say, what if we're in a cafe and we go, we'll cook and draw a frame and said, what if the frame was something like this? And it's just a sketch, but it's just to float an idea.
But the most important thing is getting behind the lens. And I know sometimes we say, let's use a 50, and then we look through the lens, we realize, we've got a 105 on there, and actually it's a better shot than what
Yeah.
your imagination thought a 50, wide-angle lens. Or
Yeah.
So, in other words, sometimes it's a matter of just
it's the accident.
trying something out. that
Exactly.
actually
Yeah,
succeeds.
yeah.
It's not as though you juggle all the lenses. It's that accident that suddenly
Propels
propels
things.
you into another universe.
Absolutely.
So how do you choose the topics of your films?
Well,
Well-
it could come from having seen or read. Usually it's literature or poetry. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I mean, it depends sometimes on the commission. So, for instance, if the Polish Cultural Institute says, we're doing a big project on Stanisław Lem, it's going to be a traveling exhibition, and we'd like to commission a film from one of his robot stories. So there it is. You have to read the 10 robot stories to decide if there's something you like there. Sometimes it'll be a commission from the Wellcome Institute, which is a medical institute in London, and they'll say, we're doing an exhibition called the Phantom Museum. And the Phantom Museum was the idea that Sir Henry Wellcome, whose collection they have, the majority of the collection is dispersed all over the world to different bodies. So hence it's called a Phantom Museum. And what they did is they just said, there's an archive in this old post office building out in Olympia, up, at Earl's Court. And it's a whole basement. And they just said, walk through it. And we just said, we'll choose such and such an object. And we'll weave a scenario. But
Make the museum look like it's in one place.
Yeah. And of course, it was like an illustration of this Phantom Museum. But what we did do was that some of the objects were that big. And so we had to use those white medical gloves because, to touch, you're not meant to touch your chemicals. Yeah. But we decided to make it a feature. And then, so you'd see the object and you had no sense of scale. So on a big screen, it would be huge. And then suddenly you see one of our hands come in and pick it up and remove it. And then you got the dramatic shift of scale of just what the detail quality was like. So to go back to your question, a lot of it comes from commissions, and a lot of times, for instance, an institute will say, we have a grant of money of, say, $50,000. Your choice of subject. Just make it come in on budget, and it's your call. So we might propose the Felisberto Hernandez story. So it just depends.
Interesting. So about Elementa and Turpism, how to combine bizarre, defective objects with a set design to make it become beautiful, attractive, and mysterious, or what is the key? So what is how in terms of like certain characteristics? How do you choose what to sort of combine them with, or does it go back to the previous inspiration from a certain character, and then it sort of transpires, or?
I think it really depends if how organic something is. So we're very quick to go for the real texture of something. That's very crucial to us. And then, but if you're going to go a certain route with certain textures, then of course you've got to rhyme that with either the decor or if you have the decor first, then you want to make sure that the puppets feel that they belong in that decor, or that they're, it's like a knot in a tree. There's these little aberrations that create whole worlds and concentric circles that for us that's what you want to pull out of things. So a found object will often set us off.
Yeah, it's going to, the many times that when we're trying to create a puppet or we go to a flea market, London had so many of them at the time. And it's always when we see things, when they lay out things, and we'd say, oh, well, look, this conjugation between this object and that object now suddenly becomes something. The man who lays them out doesn't know what
It's arbitrary.
It's arbitrary.
Right.
But for us, there's a sign.
Unless he's a failed artist and he's very carefully
He knows what's
changing things, but we're quick to see the conjugation, or that you say, there's a kind of the chance encounter, which we're hugely devotees of.
So there's like a cohesiveness again.
It does. Also, but it's unpredictable for us. You couldn't sit there and say there's a certain charge that you sense there in the two objects, and of course you try to extend that through the film if you can. That conjugation was valid, and
it's the kind of thing that actually people like Tim Burton or even Aardman, when they conceive their films, it's so storyboarded, so that 35 animators are only doing 1-2 minute sequence. There's no room for improvisation. They can't have
an idea.
Idea.
I just got this great idea.
Forget it.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's no chance encounter really in the same way.
I guess in that sense, it's maybe a little bit less artistic in that there's not like a sudden
No,
it can't be.
They can't be.
Whereas with us, nobody's looking. It's just the two of us, and we can change direction, or we can suddenly say, let's create a parenthesis here that wasn't in the storyboard. I mean, the storyboard.
There
The
wasn't a
idea, there
storyboard.
wasn't a storyboard, but there's a vague idea of a story, or I don't even think, we never even say there's stories. It's just a drift, a kind of, we're going in a certain direction and things develop. And a lot of times we start partway into the film knowing that we're going to eventually arrive at an end. And once we arrive at the end, then we know how to do the beginning. So we get a sense of that it'll rhyme or that it's leading to something.
It sort of reminds me. It reminds me of a quote by Mel Brooks. He said, "Every director has 1,000 different voices inside his head, but a good director knows how to put all of those voices in an order."
In an
you know?
order.
In other words, you may have a whole bunch of different ideas, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but then you sort of kind of winnow them down into
Yeah.
sort of like a direction.
Yeah, I think it sort of
Well,
becomes.
sort of like a general idea.
Yeah, I think the focus comes really quickly. You realize a lot of those things have to be thrown out, and that it can only come down to a few little narrow points of detail. And I think in a way,
It's also important not to know where you are in the making of the film.
Sometimes.
All you know is that you're not finished it. And you're
Yeah.
still trying to find,
yeah,
you might, if there's beginning and end, you might be, we think we're here.
I'm going to have to jot that down. That's really profound.
yeah. Use that on your teacher next time.
Yes, yes.
So what do you think about mixing digital techniques after shooting?
No, we do it. We have to. I don't. We're not purists. I don't think we have to think. I mean, when we first shot 35 and there was no digital, then we would, if you did special effects, you would rewind the camera. You'd use mats to block things out, which you can do now in After Effects easily or thing. But it was like the old silent cinema when they would sometimes, to do a shot, they would do 33 exposures on the negative. So you'd rewind the film, mask off that section, set up the next section. So it was pretty hairy and scary because you fuck up and you lose the whole negative. You have to start all over again. So, but digital makes it a lot easier. So this new film we're shooting now, we're shooting in 35, but the negative, we're not editing on 35, we're editing on digital. So it comes back as digital files. And then we work on Final Cut Pro and After Effects. And if we want to position, so what we'll shoot plates. We'll shoot another individual plate, which we know will embed into the scene. And it can be done.
It's just simple double exposures, basically.
Yeah. But
A much safer way of doing it.
and we don't do CGI because I just sort of feel that we don't have those skills, and nor we ever had the money to have people. I think we like the idea that if we can't do it,
Then it's not worth doing.
it's not worth it.
And so, final question. So what projects are you currently working on?
Well, we've been working 2 years on a project that Christopher Nolan commissioned. He said, choose the subject, 25 minutes maximum, on condition that you shoot in 35. And he left it at that. So, he's, it's you don't get those kind of commissions very often, and
Yeah, after that, we don't know what we're doing.
yeah.
I mean, we occasionally do theater design. We're doing a ballet with projections.
And decor. So we did the decors, and then there's a whole layer of projections that will be thrown onto the decor. So then we're unemployed.
That's awesome. All right. Anything else about it? All right.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.